The biggest thing that we can do to do our part to stop or slow climate change is to stop burning coal and stop burning gas, fracked gas, to fuel the energy in our power grid.
All charged up.
We have to stop that. We have to change that kind of energy, and we have to replace it with solar and wind. That's the only truly at-scale solution that's going to make a huge difference in the short term. So what I'm working on is part of our solar strategy. How do we shut down coal and fracked gas, replace it with solar? Well, the state has reviewed the numbers, and it's very clear that the only way to do that is for tens of thousands of acres of open land or farmland to be converted into solar fields. You know, it's not something we would want to do if we weren't in an emergency, but what alternative do we have? And so I have proposed that 1,800 acres of our 100,000 acre agricultural reserve should be open for solar. And doing that would enable us to power about 50,000 homes from solar power. So it would be the biggest single step we've ever taken to reduce our emissions as a county. It would be over a 4% reduction in our emissions when all 1,800 acres is built out. So, you know, it's that kind of thinking that I think is actually going to slow climate change and push against the crisis that we're in. But it's not easy. It's, you know, I know everybody wants someone else to solve the problem. That's why we have a problem, because nobody wants to pay the price. You know, I think we all think if we could just get a plug-in electric vehicle, that would help. It's not going to help that much if the power that is plugging your vehicle is from burning coal. So we have to think about the grid itself and how to transform the grid. So I'm excited about this. I know it's controversial. County executive is opposing it, but I hope we'll get it done.
That is a lofty goal. It is a big proposal, and the Ag Reserve is precious to a lot of people, and people don't want it touched. Is this going to be something that farmers, if it does pass, that farmers would participate in on a volunteer basis?
Sure, and we've heard from farmers who are supportive. I mean, some farmers are not, some farmers are. It has an acreage limit. So first of all, only 1,800 acres of the 100,000 acre reserve, but also the sites are only 10 to 12 acres. So the idea is a farming operation would just have a small piece that is solar. And then frankly, what that farmer then will have is a source of revenue to help with the, you know, making the numbers work on their farm. So I've heard from a lot of farmers who say they would love to be able to have a small solar operation. It would make it more feasible for them to grow the kind of food, for example, that we eat at our table, you know, the vegetables and the fruit, because that stuff is not profitable enough now for them to grow. So I think it will ultimately integrate nicely with the Ag Reserve. But it is a big change, but these are the kinds of changes that we have to make, or we're just not going to have a future.
Yeah, great. Well, Councilmember Hans Riemer, thank you for taking time to talk to us today. I'll look forward to see how all these proposals roll out, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thank you very much, Susan.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Mosaic, an African American perspective. I'm your host, Deborah Milo. On today's show, we'll talk about Montgomery County's upcoming primary election, which takes place on June 26th. My guests today are from Montgomery County's Board of Elections. Jessica White is the Voter Services Manager, and Leslie Woods is the...
We don't have state highway here yet.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's show.
Thank you for having us.
Not a problem at all. It's good to see you again, by the way.
Thank you.
You know, before we get started, I always like to ask my guests a little bit about how they came to be in a public service career, but specifically yours is very interesting. I'll start with you. I'm curious as to how you got started, especially when the Board of Elections.
Well, I have to say that elections is typically not a career. People say, you know, when I'm 10, I want to be an elections administrator.
Right.
So I actually started out in human resources and for the Board of Elections. and sort of caught the bug on voting. And it's sort of my way of supporting voting without getting into the highly political aspect of it.
Oh, yeah,
So-
we want to avoid that.
Yes.
We want to avoid that. No, that's,
So,
that's
you know,
wonderful.
human resources, administration, and it sort of blossomed. So now I do recruiting and training. So
And you enjoy it, don't you?
I do.
That's why it's done well, because you enjoy it.
Well, thank you.
Good for you. And how about you?
So my career in elections actually started in another state.
Really?
I really started off in the Midwest, and like Leslie, I started off in another section of county government.
Okay.
Found my way into the election office doing the business end functions, and from there, that's where I kind of got pulled into other areas. And like Leslie, it's kind of infectious. You kind of find your place there, and that's how my career started. And then 2 years ago, I relocated out here and found a job at the Board of Elections, and been working
Been there
ever since.
Well, that's why we know that your functions are done well as also. Jessica, I want to start with you and talk a little bit about what the requirements are to register and vote in the primary election.
So for the primary election, voters have to register prior to 21 days before the election. And they missed the deadline for that registration period, though. We now have same-day registration during our early voting period, which runs for 8 days before the election.
Now, is that a new concept?
So it was introduced in the legislation and passed, and we implemented in 2016. So this will be the second election cycle that this will be an option for voters. It's also can be used for voters who are already registered but need address change.
That's interesting. How long does it take to become a registered voter?
It's really pretty simple. Voters can either go online and do an application, or they can fill out a paper form, submit it to our office. We process it within a few days, and then a card's mailed out to them that's a voter notification, kind of giving them just the background of where their polling place is and letting them know an acknowledgement that they are registered to vote.
So now, how say again how citizens are notified as to where they're supposed to vote?
So when a voter first registers to vote, they receive the voter notification card, which gives them their polling location. Before every election, though, we send out a sample ballot to every registered voter that tells them more information about the different ways they can vote. It gives them their polling place location, and it also is a copy of the ballot that they'll see at the polls, so they have an opportunity to review it before they vote.
So what are some of the methods that are used?
So voters have several options to vote. Starting 21 days before the election, they can vote in-person absentee at our office. They can vote absentee by mail, which they can go online to request or call our office to get an application. They can go to early voting and vote in person in that 8-day period, or they can also vote at their assigned polling place on Election Day.
We were talking earlier in the green room, and Leslie brought up an interesting topic about the closed primary. I'd like to kind of ask you to expound upon that a little bit.
So the primary system in the state of Maryland is really a party primary. So the parties are the ones, and in Maryland it's the major parties, so the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are nominating members or candidates to go on to the general election. So in order to participate in the partisan primary, you have to be a member of either the Democratic Party
Right.
or the Republican Party. Voters who choose not to affiliate with a party and are unaffiliated can participate in the school board races, but they will not be able to participate in one of the major parties' primary unless they change their party affiliation.
I see.
And that has to be done 21 days before the election. That's not something that can be done during early voting period.
Or at on election
Or
day.
on election day, correct.
Or on
It has to
election
be
day.
done in advance. And the deadline is June the 5th.
Okay, so the deadline for that is June the 5th.
Yes, yes.
So now, is that a new concept also?
No, that's been the long-standing rule. In
So
this.
that is a longstanding rule?
But it does differ from state to state, so sometimes that's really confusing for voters. But in the state of Maryland, it is a closed primary, and they do have to be whatever party they want to participate with by June 5th.
I'm interested also, and I'm sure our viewers are as well, is that there's always outreach that needs to be done, when it comes to voting. Can you talk a little bit about the types of outreach and empowerment that you've done, within the past year or a couple of years to really get folks to encourage them to vote?
Well, I would say that we have an outreach coordinator at our office who helps arrange all the outreach activities, and we go out to hundreds of community-based events. We go out to high schools. My team is also leveraged as well as Leslie's team of recruiters and voter registration staff to go out and help register voters, recruit election judges. But we also demonstrate the voting system so that when the voters come to the polling place on election day, they have some familiarity for what their, the voting system looks like,
Right.
how to use it. So we try to get out to lots of events, and we're always willing to come out on an invitation.
We saw your picture for a half a second there. No, we did not.
When I was in high school, I remember that we actually had folks coming to our high school.
This and Mr. Quinn and Chris Conklin from Montgomery County DOT. We understand that, Greg, how are you? Now we can actually see
I'm
you.
doing well, thank you.
Good, good. We understand that you all have a hard stop at 3:30, and if that's correct, we're going to certainly honor that, and we're going to begin just as soon as you would like to begin, please.
Absolutely, I can begin anytime. Just once first, thank you for having us, and thank you for working with us on the schedule with Glenn. I know our demands are across the board right now, as I'm sure many of yours are. But Kevin and I are doing daily negotiations on the Purple Line and daily discussions on the Purple Line, and that's where we have to go right after this. So let me take a few minutes, and then I'll hand it over to Kevin, and he can kind of add some of his discussion as well. But good afternoon. For the record, my name is Greg Slater, Secretary, Maryland Department of Transportation. With me today, I have Kevin Quinn, who is our administrator for MTA. I'd like to take a few minutes, update the council on where we stand in terms of our outstanding claims and change orders submitted by PLTP, the notice of termination filed by PLTC, and then Kevin can provide an update on construction to kind of show you how things are progressing. I think it would help to first review exactly who's involved in the construction of the Purple Line. The state has a contractual relationship through a public-private partnership agreement with Purple Line Transit Partners, that's PLTP, under which PLTP is to design, build, finance, operate, and maintain the Purple Line over a period of 36 years. PLTP, in turn, has subcontracted with the Purple Line Transit Constructors, PLTC, to design and construct the project, and PLTO, which is Purple Line Transit Operators, to operate and maintain the Purple Line once we're able to really enjoy it. I think we're all familiar with the lawsuit that we all worked through, which resulted in a revocation of the Federal Transit Administration's record of decision for the project for nearly a year. The impact of that decision was the basis for a delay claim submitted to PLTP. The disagreement centered around which party is responsible for the impacts to the project and the parties. There are 4 matters noted in PLTC's notice, which are in varying stages of the process as outlined in our P3 agreement. 2 of these matters involve dispute claims that we have been in settlement negotiations that were started about a year ago by my predecessor. One of the previously mentioned delay claims associated with a lawsuit that vacated the record of decision. The other is the claim on property acquisitions that does intertwine with the vacation of the record of decision, because you can't get to those properties on those federal projects without that record of decision. We are committed, Kevin and I are in discussions daily to continuing settlement negotiations while we work through the official dispute resolution processes in the contract. So we're talking about our settlement and working through the processes at the same time. The other matters involve CSX and MDE issues. There are more recent issues that are in the early stages of our process that really started to come out over the last year, but recently pushed forward. Based on the information we have at this time, we're working through with the parties and discussing that information. We still do need some more information. All 4 of these claims have been subject of a very focused settlement discussion that began, of course, with my predecessor and are ongoing today. I can't really talk too much about the details or the merits of the claim or comment on specific details because I actually have personally a role in the dispute resolution process towards the end. So in the official process, I have to kind of somewhat stay neutral and talk through those until we get there. I'm personally committed to finding a mutually agreeable outcome. It's important that whatever we agree on is in the best interest of the state and its taxpayers, short-term and long-term. I think it's important that I talk about kind of where our head is in terms of these negotiations. One is, what does the contract say for issues like this? Two is, how do we work together on finding a successful path for the project? And three, what's the successful path? How do we solve the successful issue, the issue that we're facing today, and make sure we're not back here in 6 months or a year? So we want to make sure that we work through the process, but also build some relationships so that we can have a successful project moving forward after this one. But it is important to remember the relationships here and how the project is structured. It's a P3 agreement that includes a number of important protections for the state, and we're working through all of those. At this point, I can't really talk about the intentions of PLTC and where they are, but I can tell you that my intention is to continue to proceed with the process laid out in the contract and continue to work on settlement negotiations on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day. I'll note that in closing, before I turn it over to Kevin, that construction on the project has not been interrupted. PLTP has upheld its responsibility under the contract to ensure that everyone remains on the job and both sides remain committed to completing the project as soon as possible. I will add, before I turn it over to Kevin, that I can tell you that there are conversations daily. There are multiple conversations on some days, and they're very productive. Really, really good discussions about how we navigate through these challenges and make it successful for everyone. So at this point, I'll turn it over to MTA Administrator Quinn, who can provide an update on kind of where things are in terms of construction, and then we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Quinn, please.
Sure. I'm going to attempt the technical marvel here of trying to share my screen, which I think whenever this happens effectively, we all feel a tremendous sense of accomplishment. So let me see if I can do that. Can you all see that?
You did it. You did it.
The miracle. All right, great. First, again, I do want to thank you for inviting us to brief you here today. It's a fantastic project. And as you can see by a lot of the ongoing activity on the corridor, we're taking advantage of the fewer motor vehicles and fewer pedestrians out on the road. With that in mind, work has really continued to move forward at a pretty brisk pace, with additional safety measures in place to keep our staff and the public safe, of course, during this time of COVID-19. So I want to talk about, before I kind of get into just some of the safety measures that we have put in place. So, in daily briefings, workers on the project have been reminded to maintain social distancing really as much as possible. They've been equipped with and required to wear full PPE, including gloves, protective eyewear, and face masks. Our staff have received detailed instructions on how to wear and take care of homemade face coverings. Our field staff is carrying hand sanitizer. PLTC has added additional hand washing stations across the alignment. And we're really taking that seriously. We're all in discussions about these days how to keep everybody safe during this time. And so that said, I'm really happy to report construction's about 30% complete and advancing at a pretty rapid pace. So just I want to give kind of a highlight reel of going from west to east across the alignment of some of the good work that's going on. So starting in Bethesda, the terminus of the light rail line, we're really seeing that retaining wall and foundation work on Pearl Street, the Georgetown Branch Trail, and Sleaford Road has been ongoing. At the Bethesda Metro Station south entrance, the shaft, formwork continues to be placed in preparation for concrete lining that will be poured in the upcoming months. As you can see, just a tremendous amount of work going on there. Driving down Connecticut Avenue, you'll see construction of the abutments for the Connecticut Avenue overpass and the Capitol Crescent Trail. We're looking at girder installation planned for this summer. Now that will require some temporary short-term traffic stoppages and some lane closures. And as always, we'll closely coordinate that with Montgomery County and with MDOT SHA. Girders have also been set at Chevy Chase Lake Drive bridges there, and the deck for the CCT bridge is actually being constructed as we speak. So some good work going on there. The excavation for the Jones Mill Road underpass has reached its final depth of 35 feet, and PLTC is in the process of building the substructure for the light rail line and the CCT underpasses, and will begin setting the precast arches late this spring or early summer. And also, girders have been set for the new Rock Creek Bridge that the Purple Line will travel on. This is a 193-foot parabolic tub girder bridge. I wanted to be sure I nailed that, which is about 50 feet above the creek, and these girders are huge. Construction of the CCT abutments will occur over the next 6 months, as well as completion of the creek restoration. Continuing to move east across the alignment over to Littonsville. In Littonsville, we've continued utility work and retaining wall installation around the Littonsville Place Bridge for preparation of station construction. Construction of the Talbot Avenue Bridge has also continued. As you probably know, we're replacing that historic structure with a wider venue that will accommodate more cars, bikes, pedestrians, and the CCT. Pile driving for that bridge was completed during winter break. Installation for the foundation and substructure of that bridge is ongoing right now, and we expect construction of that bridge to be complete by the end of this year. From 16th Street to Spring Street, tree clearing has been completed, and installation of sheet pile for a crash wall there began in May. Demolition of the existing Spring Street Bridge is scheduled for fall 2020, with construction lasting there about 7 months. I want to move to Silver Spring, where there's just a tremendous amount of work, and I hope these photos really convey the work that's been going on. But in Silver Spring, really home of the region's largest transit hub, the bridge girders were erected across the Metro Red Line and CSX tracks. That's a span of about 280 feet. Another span of about 260 feet across Colesville Road in early 2020. And if you want, you can catch a video, actually, of the construction sequences and the way that we did it on our social media pages at Purple Line MD. And there you can also see installation of part of the truss bridge that will support the CCT over Colesville Road. 3 spans have been installed, and the 4th will be installed later during construction of the new Purple Line Station mezzanine. And ultimately, the CCT will really connect to the Metropolitan Branch Trail. It's a really critical connection, and we're excited about that. The huge amount of work that's taking place all around the Silver Spring Transit Center, as you know, required multiple evening and weekend closures of Colesville Road and the temporary shift of bus stops from the Silver Spring Transit Center to about a block up on Colesville Road. And I want to thank you all for the coordination. There's a lot of coordination with many agencies and local stakeholders to be sure that commuters were really ready for those changes. On May 2nd, Colesville Road reopened at full capacity. We were really excited about that. I know folks were excited about that, and bus service resumed in the lower level of the transit center. Deck work has also begun, and you're going to see that continuing for several months on the LRV elevated track there. And following completion of piers in that green space right in front of the transit center, additional girders will be placed on the level 2 entrance this summer. And that'll bring the total elevated track length in that area to a little over 1,100 feet. Bonifant Street in that area, also Bonifant Street West, was closed May 11th between Ripley and Georgia Avenue for utility relocations. There's a detour that's in place for motor vehicles, and local access is being maintained for pedestrians and vehicular traffic to parking garages and the surrounding buildings in that area. On Wayne Avenue, we've continued overhead and underground utility relocation work between Fenton Street and Manchester Place. PLTC is conducting individual outreach to homeowners on potential impacts they may see during this work. Upcoming work in this area includes a maintenance of traffic shift from Dale Drive over to the Plymouth Tunnel, for which will widen the roadway and shift traffic to the westbound side of Wayne Avenue. And reconstruction of the Wayne Avenue Bridge across Lilo Creek will be completed in 2 phases, and traffic shifts will occur to accommodate that work with 2 phases, the first in summer of 2020 and through fall of 2020 when phase 2 will be implemented. And I just want to remind everybody, that Silver Spring Metro station that is elevated, it's adjacent to the top level of the Paul Sarbanes Transit Center that's there. It features side platforms, provides access to the WMATA Red Line Metro Station and elevators to and from the ground level in Colesville Road here. Shifting over to Long Branch, concrete work for the construction of the Manchester Place station, the western portal, has continued. During phase one, the Kenwood House parking lot that you see there was temporarily relocated, but we expect that to be restored by late summer of 2020. Phase two will begin with demolition of the temporary Kenwood House parking lot to complete the construction work, the concrete work for the Manchester Place station by January of 2021. And inside the tunnel, we're starting to see waterproofing and the final lining to be completed. Construction of the safety and emergency walkway will soon begin there. The tunnel's eastern portal will soon be brought to grade at Arliss Street, and demobilization of the tunnel plant and excavation equipment will proceed at that time. Utility relocations will continue on Piney Branch Road, where retaining wall work will begin in the next 6 months. And Arliss Street from Flower Avenue to Piney Branch will be closed to all but local traffic for about 18 months for installation of track and construction of the Piney Branch Road station beginning late this summer. And lastly, just want to touch on some work on University. University Boulevard, as you I'm sure well know, remains very busy with overhead and underground utility relocations and stormwater drainage systems. Some of that roadway work includes widening, grading, concrete curb and sidewalk reconstruction. And in the next 6 months, you're going to start seeing some new temporary traffic signals along University Boulevard at multiple locations, including Seek Lane, where unfortunately, as you probably remember well, we had a pedestrian fatality back in October 2019. And, in talking to project staff, that was a real wake-up call. And I think we have done a lot since then in working with local elected officials. We went out and did a tour with our project managers, MDOT SHA, local officials to review that area. We've installed additional barriers in the area to prevent mid-block crossings. We moved forward with hiring a full-time maintenance of traffic manager to oversee access really throughout the entire corridor. And I just want to, again, convey that safety is absolutely the #1 priority for us on this project. A couple other photos. Here's one of just a gas main relocation on University Boulevard, and what the Tacoma Langley station is going to look like, which features a center platform on University adjacent to the Tacoma Langley Transit Center, connecting riders to the Tacoma Langley Crossroads Transit Center, which is the largest non-Metro Rail station transfer point in the region. So, as you've heard, we've absolutely been engaged in completing this project, and we have every confidence that we're going to be producing here a light rail system that's going to meet the high standards of MTA, of the citizens of Maryland and Montgomery County. As the Secretary has noted, construction has absolutely not been interrupted throughout this process, and we continue to remain committed to this and committed to ongoing negotiations with PLTP. With that, I'll turn it back over to the Council and the Secretary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Quinn. Mr. Slater, did you have anything else to add, or? No, Mr. Slater, did you have anything else to add?
Sorry, I'm talking to myself in mute. I'm doing that a lot these days. No, I will add and reiterate that both Kevin and I personally and this whole department is committed to resolving these issues and delivering the Purple Line for the citizens of Maryland.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Mr. Conklin if he has anything to add, if he can take himself off of mute. But Mr. Slater or Mr. Quinn, are we on schedule? Will this be still on the same schedule? That I know it's ongoing, but is it on the same schedule?
Go ahead, Kevin. I don't have that in front of me.
No, you're on. Yeah, there you go.
There we go. Yeah, sorry, it took me a second there. Yeah, so our goal remains to open the Purple Line in 2 phases, with phase 1 by December of 2022. That's 6 stations between New Carrollton to College Park. Phase 2 would open by mid-2023. That's the remaining 15 stations and full service in Montgomery County.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Conklin, did you have anything to add?
Just a couple things. I mean, the primary concerns that we have as a department are making sure that the construction continues to progress and that the open sites don't become inactive open sites in the county. Our colleagues at MTA have been good at communicating to us their desire to get these negotiations finished. And we obviously share their concerns about impacts to taxpayers, both for the state and the county, in terms of any additional costs that may or may not be warranted because of the earlier issues with the project, the lawsuit, and other things. So beyond that, I don't really have a lot to add. Obviously, MTA and the secretary are in the driver's seat representing the work that's part of the county-funded projects that's in here that they're implementing through the agreement we have with MDOT. And we hope that they can reach a resolution quickly. With that, I'll leave the rest of the time for council members to ask their questions.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to Council Vice President Hucker, the chair of the Transportation and Environment Committee. Just for my colleagues, I am going to try to keep it to the 5-minute rule, though. Right now, we only have the 3 council members who want to speak, Councilmember Hucker, Councilmember Glass, and Councilmember Reamer. If that's the case, we can relax that rule, but we are going to honor the 3:30 cutoff time for the state. We're most appreciative that they're here. And with that, Council Vice President Hucker.
Thank you, Greg and Kevin, for being here. We all greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I'm glad to hear of the confidence you both expressed that this project is going to stay on track. I heard more about the confidence to ongoing negotiation than to avoiding any future delays. I should say, I guess at the onset, I was very concerned about both that the breakdown in the negotiations between PLTC and PLTP had reached such a dramatic point, and it was distressing, and it felt unprofessional to find out about it from reporters rather than from you all. And I talked to Mr. Conklin that afternoon, and it sounded like that was pretty close to his experience as well, and even staff at PLTC as well. So I'm a little surprised that we hadn't heard about that from you and been briefed before we got to that point. It would be how important this project is to our whole region. You and we have all spent a huge amount of time on it. It would be appalling to see this get stalled this summer after 3 years of construction. We can't allow a 16-mile construction site to be stretched across Montgomery and Prince George's counties. And an abandonment of a project like this would be unprecedented in our county's history. Our constituents have already put up with years of inconvenience, and they're really counting on this project, to get done on time. I'm glad to hear you're involved daily, Mr. Secretary. Can I ask? And I'm sort of reluctant. I don't know whether I should ask all my questions at once, Mr. President, to get them in the 5 minutes, because I think any of the answers could go over that. But have you? How many times, Greg, have you met with them since May 1st, since that announcement? And how long are these meetings? Are these sort of daily 5-minute check-ins, or are you at the table working through this every day?
I'd have to actually go back and count on my calendar.
Sure.
How many.
But in general, I'll take your word for it.
They vary. So, sometimes they're just 30 minutes. Hey, what has developed in the last 24 hours on your end? What has developed in the last 24 hours on our end? Sometimes there are longer conversations, several hours, where we work through details of particular issues so that we can understand them better. And then sometimes they're just kind of discussions on different parts of our contract, but also different parts of the claims in dispute. Now, I have somewhat of a position of advantage and disadvantage, where I'm coming into this somewhat as a fresh blank slate, kind of looking at things with a very open mind, because my involvement is relatively new on this front. So, I think it's I would classify the discussions as productive. One thing I'd ask you to clarify, you referenced that you said PLTC was caught off guard by this. Did you mean PLTP?
I think I meant PLTP. Sorry, when I talked to their government relations folks, they said they found out from the press release as well, which was quite a shock.
So we shared that experience as well.
Yeah.
So
Great.
we were kind
No,
of
I
working
agree with
through.
Right. And how that's, I'm glad, I mean, I have great confidence in you and your ability to get this done. How involved has the governor been? And in particular, one of these 4 areas of dispute is really a dispute between MDOT and MDE. And I'm as committed to stormwater management as anybody. It was my stormwater management bill that the governor renamed the rain tax many years ago, and helped to get elected on. So, but this seems like an interagency set of issues that the governor in particular could work out, especially if Pond Code 378 wasn't even in existence at the time of the project setting date, as it says in our packet.
So I would say that the code being in existence of the setting date is, we're still working. We don't have a lot of the detail to really evaluate that claim. So Kevin could maybe expand on that, but so recognizing that some of these issues are cross-department, the governor's office is actually kind of monitoring and tracking and checking in regularly because they want to see success on this project as well. And then I'm having ongoing dialogue with Secretary Grumbles and that entire MDE team as we're working together because the state is the state. And so we work through those issues as a team very openly.
Right. I just thank you. I appreciate that. This is the governor's marquee transit project. Infrastructure is the theme of his NGA presidency. If the largest transit P3 in the nation can't get completed on time under his leadership, I'm not sure how the Montgomery County public and the private investors that are watching this are going to have much confidence in the state's ability to deliver a much more, complicated and larger P3 managed lanes project. So I really hope that the governor's really personally involved. And Mr. President, just one more question around federal involvement. Greg, have you looked into or considered refinancing the Purple Line's TIFIA loan? Wouldn't that save potentially millions of dollars if that were refinanced? And have you involved the federal delegation? When I've spoken to Congressman Raskin's office and the senator's office, they say they hadn't heard from MDOT or PLTP about resolving any of these disputes, when it seems to me they'd be critical in helping to secure additional federal funding and into putting pressure on CSX to resolving that dispute.
So I think I'll touch on it in a few ways. One is, yes, we're talking to Build America Bureau and TIFIA and as a team, but the state and PLTP together about what opportunities we have to refinance TIFIA. The interest rates are very good right now, and certainly that could provide some advantages. And so where I would say where we differ is I'm not necessarily sure that, extra funding that may or may not be warranted is the solution. We have to work through the merits of the claim, who's responsible for the risks, and what the exposure is on both sides, and then work on the funding piece. So I don't want to just get in a situation where we're just paying claims without understanding the merits of the claim and protecting the taxpayers.
I agree with that sequence, absolutely. It seems like they're part of the solution, and you would think you'd want to involve them. Mr. President, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you want, I will put you back on the list if there's time. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Secretary Slater and Mr. Quinn, for joining us this afternoon. I do appreciate the briefing. I appreciate the photos and the graphics of the updates for things that have been done over the last 6 months or so, since at least the T&E committee and now the full council have received an update. And I look forward to being the first in line to ride the Purple Line when it opens. But with that said, when the Transportation and Environment Committee had a hearing back in March of 2019, I asked about the status of this project and was told that the Purple Line Transit partners and the state were far apart on a settlement for cost overruns. In fact, I was actually told that the cost overruns were, quote, far less than what was being reported in the media, and that was $300 million last year. I asked the same question at a subsequent hearing that the committee had in September of 2019, which didn't generate a detailed response either. So here we are now in May of 2020, and I'll ask the question that I've asked twice before but have not received a sufficient response to. Is this project on budget?
Let me let Kevin answer that one in terms of, I think we have to figure out where the claims are and those types of things. I think there are a variety of levels to that. And so one budget is kind of at the end, but you have right in the middle of a project, you compare where you are in terms of percentages of progress and where your budget is expended and those types of things. So let me ask kind of Kevin where to answer that one.
Yeah, I mean, so sitting here today, yes, I'd say it largely is. I think it's these claims that are outside, and that's what's got to be resolved, and that's what we're in the process of negotiating right now. I'm happy to get you more information on exactly how much has been billed and all of that, but as of right now, yeah, we're on track.
Okay, so you're saying we're on track, but the media reports that came out about 3 weeks ago said that we are approximately $519 million over budget. How do you square those two thoughts?
So that's the total of claims that have been submitted by PLTP, and that's what's certainly in dispute, and that's what we're in negotiations for right now.
Well, so the Purple Line Transit Partners, have they been able to identify the root causes of any of these cost overruns? Is it regulatory hurdles? Is it construction cost, increased labor cost, a combination thereof?
Well, I think what the Secretary noted at the beginning, the vacation of the rod at the beginning of this project caused an 11-month delay in the project, and so I think there are some delay days and delay costs that are associated with that, and that's a big subject of our ongoing negotiations, is sort of the merits and the value of that.
Okay, well, Mr. Quinn, for you and for everybody else who's paying attention, Montgomery County has contributed approximately $225 million to the state to help build the Purple Line, $110 million to help build the south entrance to the Bethesda Metro, $53 million in direct contribution for the construction, $2 million to help build a hiker-biker trail in Silver Spring connecting downtown with Sligo Creek, and then approximately $61 million to help with the Capitol Crescent Trail, excluding the tunnel, which the county is now appropriated a little more than $50 million towards in our capital fund. And so I share these details because Montgomery County taxpayers deserve to know how our funds are being used. And for the state to, what I think is withhold this information does a disservice. And it was only through my questions back in September of last year did we learn that the system was not going to open in a continuous track, that it was through my probing that we learned it was going to be opening in two segments, with the Prince George's segment opening first. And so more broadly, this project was created as a public-private partnership. Unfortunately, I think the public is being left in the dark. And what this partnership needs is oversight and accountability. And I think these conversations are really the only ones that are happening regarding this project. And when I keep asking questions, they're not being answered. And we only get glimmers of information through the media, which are somewhat being countered now. So I'm at a loss to what to tell my constituents, an overwhelming majority of whom support the project, as do I, and we're excited about it. But they too are dismayed about the information they're hearing and the lack of transparency regarding the costs. And so at the end of the day, we need more accountability and oversight over this. And I'm still, this being the third conversation I've had as a council member, still not finding any of the answers adequate. So how do we get through this? When are we going to start having an open conversation about the hundreds of millions of dollars that taxpayers in Montgomery County and Maryland might be on the hook for?
So, Mr. Councilmember, let me, maybe I can follow up. I want to make sure I'm clear on exactly what information you're looking for that you're not getting. One of the things that Kevin and I are really focused on is in these ongoing settlement discussions, you have agreements and you have disagreements, but it's really important that you keep some level of confidentiality in those discussions so people can talk freely, and we do that way. When it comes to the rod and right of way, we have a much clearer picture. You know, there's certainly some details that we can share about that if you're interested. I think a lot of that was kind of well shared in terms of the amount of delay in the lawsuit that caused that. Frankly, that was nobody's fault. You know, that's not, and so we work through those issues. When it comes to the CSX and the MDE claims that we're working through, there's a variety of information under the partnership, under the P3 agreement, that PLTP is required to submit to us, and it's detailed so that we can analyze any potential claim, and we can look through it and make sure and look at its merits and look at it from a variety of different perspectives. But maybe I'll ask Kevin to kind of share a little bit about where we are in those two claim processes, but to make sure, I don't know if we actually have all the information that you're looking for at this point, but I'd be happy to follow up if there's a detailed list.
Yeah, I think, you know, the key to us being able to be transparent, and we can certainly be more transparent, is having all the information at hand. And so, you know, as the Secretary noted earlier, I think we shared in your surprise at, you know, hearing in the Washington Post of the termination being filed for extended delay. That's not something that the state knew was going to happen ahead of time. We had been engaged in what we thought was productive negotiations up until that point. These two additional claims that have been submitted for both CSX and MDE related issues, you know, the concessionaire has filed neither time impact analyses nor detailed cost estimates for both of those claims. And so that makes it tough for us to do a solid analysis on that and then to convey that to you. But, you know, as it relates to transparency, you know, I think this is a good discussion, and I think the Secretary and I are certainly committed to more of these types of discussions to increase transparency.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the acknowledgement that more transparency is needed, and Secretary Slater, I accept your offer to continue this conversation. So
Thank you very much. Councilmember Reamer, we do have other people now on the list, so, and it's 3:14, almost 3:14. Councilmember Reamer. He was having issues, so we'll come back to him. Freezing issues again. I don't want to. Councilmember Friedson. No, well, Hans is back. Hans, are you ready? Can you connect?
Could you please put me back in the queue?
Yeah, you're up now. Okay. Go ahead.
Look, can you go to the next speaker, please?
Okay, I'll go to the next speaker.
Reconnect.
Councilmember Friedson.
From freezing to Friedson, back to freezing to Friedson again.
Yeah, that's right. You're using your time. Go ahead.
So, sounds good. First of all, this is a tough conversation. Obviously, the fact that we have to be talking about cost overruns and contractors walking away from deals and disputes between government agencies is really disappointing. We all agree and are committed to this project. It's about environmental sustainability. It's about economic development opportunity. It's about equity and access to public transportation and to job centers east and west from Montgomery to Prince George's. And this is a critical project and one that is not just a county priority, a state priority, and a regional priority. And we have to get it right. And I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the work and the commitment that you all have put into this. And I just think that it's important that we move towards a resolution and we make sure that we move forward in a way that respects and appreciates the taxpayers who are on the hook for a chunk of this deal, a large portion of this deal, but that we actually get the project right so that it serves the purpose that it was intended to serve. Just quickly, could you reiterate the timeline of when we expect the project to be completed with specific dates, and that this current issue that has been raised with the contractor walking away has not changed that from where it currently is, which has experienced some delays already?
Sure. So just to reiterate, so our goal right now, our schedule that we're working on is a phase one opening by December of 2022. So that phase one is 6 stations between New Carrollton and College Park.
And how about Montgomery County?
And then phase 2 would be in full opening by mid of 2023. That's the remaining 15 stations with full service in Montgomery County.
Thank you. And then can I just confirm, we had a commitment previously, I just want to make sure we reiterate it here, that the tunnel would be able to be open as soon as it's ready, would not have to wait, or excuse me, the trail would have to be open, or would be able to be open, the Capitol Crescent Trail here would be able to be open when it is ready and safe, and not necessarily when the light rail opens?
I'm going to give you a tentative yes. I believe that's the case. I want to confirm that. That's a fantastic question, and if I could follow up with you on that. But I remember having some discussions with my team about that the other day. I believe the answer is yes, but let me follow up with you just to confirm that.
I'd appreciate that. It's a huge issue. That trail is just as important of a transportation infrastructure to the local community as the train itself is going to be for the broader community, and it's a really important aspect of this. If you could follow up, that would be really helpful. And as mentioned before, this county has made significant commitments, and we doubled down on those commitments as part of this current capital budget, as difficult as it was with the tunnel and fulfilling that at the later years of this project. I just wanted to confirm that none of the disputes that are occurring between government agencies and amongst members of the concessionaire private sector portion of this public-private partnership would directly impact the county's investment or directly cause a additional amount of county funding to be required.
That is correct. We're working through those issues as a state. But
Okay.
I would put just something in there too. You issued disputes between state government agencies. We don't necessarily have disputes between two state government agencies. We have a dispute between a private sector entity and the state. So MDE and MDOT are working very closely together and trying to resolve the issues and trying to look at them from a variety of perspectives to make sure that whatever we do, if there's a process challenge, that we work on that today, as well as making sure that we're not back here, but also that we're keeping the interests of the taxpayers at the forefront, as well as the responsibilities under the contract in a public-private partnership. Because in a public-private partnership, there, as you know, there are certain risks on the private sector when they go after these types of jobs, and there are certain risks on the state when they go after these jobs, and we have to make sure it's done as intended.
I appreciate that. I will rephrase the disputes between the concessionaire and the ongoing discussions between government agencies. It's a distinction without a ton of difference to me, because it is part of the challenges for the project opening on time and some of the
Absolutely. I value my partnership with MDE a lot.
Well, I appreciate it, and I just hope that we can move this project forward. As I said in the beginning, it is a critically important transportation, economic, and equity issue for us here in this region and for the entire state, and I hope that we can all work together to be able to bring it to a resolution that doesn't cost the taxpayers additional funding.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you so much. Just wanted to follow up, elephant in the room. If you can't reach an agreement by June, what happens then? And what is the significance of June? Do both parties have to agree to extend that? So what's the significance of June? Will it extend beyond that, or is June a hard date? And if so, what happens? Is there a scenario where the state takes it over and builds it, or is it automatically going to be rebid? What's the process to do that?
I think there, and I might ask Kevin to kind of weave in a little bit, but there are a variety of scenarios there that could take place. I think we've looked at all of them, and we've kind of put them all somewhat on the side burner, because we all remain committed, PLTP and the state, into working out a resolution that we don't get to that point. But it's important to kind of reiterate that our contract is with PLTP, the P3 concessionaire, and the dispute is actually with PLTC, who the state does not have a contract with. So that contract is with between PLTP and PLTC. So it's PLTP, their responsibility to manage the design build contract. So they don't work for us. the people that put the notice out, the group that put the notice out, they don't work for the state. They work for
So-
PLTP.
Does that imply that PLTP could solicit a new partner to continue working on it? Is that
If they so choose that, yes.
and that's interesting. So your dispute is with PLTC. Tell me more about what that means. The distinction
So-
between.
There are three groups involved in the project. PLTP, which is Purple Line Transit Partners. They're the overarching private sector entity lead on the project. They have contracts with two other groups, PLTC, which is the design build contractor, and PLTO, which is the operator maintenance group as the long-term operations. So in the dispute is actually a file of notice by PLTC to PLTP, not to the state. So we have a contract with PLTP, who's responsible for design build. So they're working. The dispute is actually between PLTP and PLTC.
That's why you said you were a broker in this context. I was trying to understand that. I couldn't quite grasp that. Okay.
So we just all want to come together and make the project successful and get it out there for our citizens. So, it's almost regardless of whose contractual relationship it is. It's just everybody coming together to try and solve the challenges.
Thank you. And is there any, public transportation right now is taking a hit. We have distancing issues. Of course, that's going to be resolved. This immediate issue will be resolved by the time the Purple Line opens. Is that a non-factor as far as long-term projections or any of this? It's not part of this.
I sure hope so. I think, I sure hope we're out of this crisis by then. And, Kevin and I are working really hard on all of the transit systems across the state, whether it's MARC or commuter bus, or whether it's our bus system in Baltimore City. We're working to make sure that when society is ready to come back and when it's safe to do so from the health experts, that we have a transit system that's ready to respond to that. And so looking at kind of programming and making sure that first and foremost, people can social distance on our transit vehicles, that we're cleaning and very visibly making sure that they're safe to do so. Our operators are safe and they can make sure they work in a safe environment. It's just critical that we think about it that way, but we really want to make sure that environment is safe for all of us and our partners at WMATA as well.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. We are now at 3:23. Next speaker is Councilmember Albornoz. We have Councilmember Juando following him, and we promise Vice President Hucker 1 minute of a follow-up at the end. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very much associate myself with all the comments of my colleagues. The bottom line is this project is too big and too important to fail. And we are all on the same team here with the same stated goal to be able to move this project forward because it's so important on so many different levels. Most of my questions have been asked. I did have a question. The supply chain has been impacted in every industry because of the pandemic. And have we seen any signs or are there any concerns that those supply chain issues may bleed into the development of the project?
Mm-hmm. They and I'm probably going to get Kevin to expand on this, but they did kind of weave into it a little bit about a month ago, but they seem to be resolved now, and so the supply chain seems to be open and flowing. I know I'll just speak somewhat outside of the project where the supply chain from overseas at the Port of Baltimore was down a little bit, but now it's rebounding quite nicely, and our container activity is moving. And once that supply chain over from Europe and China started to open back up, then our supply chain started to kind of pick back up here. But it had some impact early on, but it hasn't really recently. Kevin, do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some impact kind of early on, right when it first hit. I think it hit almost every industry kind of immediately. But I think we had a lot of materials here on hand. I've heard of other transit systems, transit agencies nationwide that have been hit by products coming out of China, other places. But I think we've largely mitigated that here, and we'll see kind of what that impact is, but I don't suspect it'll be major.
Great. Thank you both. And I yield back, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. We're getting close for this time frame for you. Councilmember Juando, and then we're going to have 1 minute for Councilmember Vice President Hucker, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to Mr. Slater and Mr. Quinn for being here today. Very concerned about this. Obviously, the thing about P3s is that they theoretically allow us to, because we don't have the taxpayer money or enough to bear the burden of the entire cost project, you get to shift some of the burden in the risk, right? And then there's a premium charged, and you get to operate and earn money over the long term. So all that is great, and I understand that's the reason. But at the end of the day, regardless of who signed the contract with which Purple Line partner of the alphabet soup partners that we have, we made a political contract and a political commitment, all of us collectively, the state and local elected officials, to say that we're going to deliver on this transportation project. And so if there are delays, which there have been, and cost overruns, which there may be, or if an additional partner is not brought in to continue the work in this agreement, we're going to have to pick it up, probably at great cost and at big delay. And so my concern is that, and I want to know how much of a reality do you think, is that possible at this point, kind of building off of a previous question, that we could be in the position of an agreement not being worked on, and we're going to be talking about multiple year delays and major cost overruns?
Sure. I think it's important that I answer that with how I've framed our conversations with our P3 partners, where, what I've told them is I'm looking at this and we're looking at this, everything with a blank slate. And I agree with you. We have a political contract and a community contract. And so, what I'm looking at is one, risks and contracts. So, in a P3, each entity is applied certain risks. That's important to us. In a P3, certain parties have different contractual obligations. That's important to us when we look at these claims. And when you look at costs, it's important to look at first, who's responsible for the costs, and usually it's somewhere in between where both parties are. But the other component of that I'm very mindful of is there's a cost to our citizens for delay of this project. Outside of the taxpayer investment piece, there's a cost to our citizens for a project that's stalled or delayed. And that's very much on the table as part of our conversations as well. But I'll reiterate that we are committed and talking at very high levels every day on this project to resolve it. And I would classify the discussions right now as very productive. We don't want to get to that outcome. And we just have to make sure that we're keeping the state's interest in mind and the citizens' interest in mind, and balancing in that at the same time.
Okay, and one last question. I know we're running short on time here. So the steps that are being taken to secure a new construction partner, that you would include that in your statement of things are positive and looking good, and that you don't think, can you give a time frame estimate?
I would tell you that we're not taking steps to secure a new construction partner. We're trying to work out our issues with the existing construction partner.
Okay, so you're not at, okay, thank you. That's an important point. So you're trying to just work out where you are with the current
Absolutely.
partner.
That's the best path for this project's success is to continue where we are and keep moving and find a deal that's fair for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. And the last speaker is going to be Vice President Hucker. I think it should be noted to our friends from the state that we're coming in right on budget and under time. I just want that to be noted. Councilmember Vice President Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Kevin, for being here. I would like to have more frequent updates, I think, so whether it's in committee or full council, so we can avoid some of the surprises you heard today and track the milestones that you're hitting. That's how design build should work. I just want to reiterate what's been said a little bit on, and not leave the door open. I have further questions. I'll follow up with you guys individually. But as far as I'm concerned, as well as my colleagues, it sounds like this has to move forward without additional cost to Montgomery County. Our county already put a pint of blood in at the front end at the beginning of the Hogan administration. We don't have money, and we're paying twice. We're the biggest contributors to the state treasury as well. We don't have money to add to the dual contributions we've already made. MDOT renegotiated, our contribution at the front end, we can't really allow that to happen a second time. Our CIP is very filled up, and I really hope I have confidence in you all. I hope the governor is going to be personally involved, the level he needs to be to give you the support that you need, because we really can't allow the delay or any additional overruns. So I'm glad to hear it's getting the attention from you all, and I hope
absolutely. And I will tell you, it's getting the governor wants this to be a success. We're keeping him up to date and his team and making sure that everybody's up to date along the way. And he is this continues to be a priority for him and for the citizens of this region.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very, very much for being with us. We sincerely appreciate it. We are your partner as well in many, many other ways, not just in this one. So we want to continue to work together. Thank you.
Great.
And we are adjourned. I know you all have other meetings. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Change for riders boarding buses during the emergency. Passengers are now required to board at the rear door of the bus. Passengers can board through the front doors if a lift is needed to accommodate a disability or stroller. During the emergency, all ride-on services will be temporarily free to all passengers. FlexBus On-Demand Transit, a pilot program implemented in 2019 in the Rockville